Welcome to the Ringer NFL show. I'm your host, Sheil Kapadia, joined by my friend today, John Jastremski, JJ from New York, and the Ringer Gambling Show. He's got like 400 gigs. I'm not going to name them all because we try to keep these shows tight, but we have JJ on today because the New York Giants already 1 week into the season have a quarterback situation. And JJ, we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about where this thing is going with Russell Wilson, Jaxson Dart. I got some takes I got to fire off, but is this the biggest story in New York coming out of week one of the NFL season?
Oh, yeah, no question about it. I mean, you could preach the positivity of what Justin Fields was able to do for the New York Jets, but with all of the optimism and all of the excitement that came out of July and August in Giant land, yes, Sheil, I think this quarterback situation is constantly going to be under the microscope. And yeah, with the way the Giants played in week one, I knew it was inevitable that on my voicemail line on New York, or all the Giant fans that see me in the street, you're going to get the obvious question. JJ, when we get Jaxson Dart?
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that and maybe some of that misguided optimism in July and August. I want to get to that because I'm very interested in how the Giants are covered both locally and nationally as well. So let's take a quick break. We come back. We're talking Russell Wilson, Jaxson Dart, and the New York Giants. This is the Ringer NFL show presented by FanDuel, and the NFL is officially back. So if you're going to be in it with FanDuel. They've got the goods, futures, live betting, SGPs, your way bets, all of it. The app's clean, it's fast, and yeah, when you win, you get paid instantly, which is nice because Sunday patience doesn't exist. So get your bets in, build something bold, and make every game feel bigger. Download the FanDuel app or head to FanDuel.com/RingerNFL to get started. The Ringer is committed to responsible gaming. Please visit rg-help.com to learn more about the resources and helplines available, and listen to the end of the episode for additional details. Must be 21 plus and present in select states, or 18 plus and present in DC, Kentucky, or Wyoming. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit rg-help.com. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut. Paid endorsement. All right, we're back on the Ringer NFL show. So JJ, Brian Daboll's asked about it after their loss to the Commanders, their uninspired loss to the Commanders on Sunday. He doesn't commit to Russell Wilson. I start thinking, this guy's making a change. He comes back the next day. He says, no, we're sticking with Russell Wilson for this week. What is your read on this situation? Why they're sticking with Russell Wilson? And in your opinion, is this exclusively a Brian Daboll decision, or are there other people there pulling some strings as well?
All right, there's a lot to break down here. You got to go back to the offseason. The Giants already had Jameis Winston under contract. There were plans of drafting a quarterback. They were the worst kept secret in the world. It was going to be a first or a second round pick. And then about a month before the draft, I'm on a walk and I get news that Russell Wilson signs with the Giants. So if that's the case, you got to figure that there's some wink, wink, hush, hush type of an agreement when Russell Wilson comes in that he's going to get a certain amount of time. Now, sure, what that is, I don't have the slightest idea. The Giants have not exactly detailed it to the media. This is exactly when you're going to see the youngster. But I was not of the belief that Jaxson Dart could go and take this job immediately. The Giants made it clear they wanted to at least slow cook him from the get-go. They bring in all these veteran quarterbacks. I was thinking at the earliest you'd see Jaxson Dart week 5 against the New Orleans Saints, knowing, hey, at Washington, at Dallas, game against the Chiefs, game against the Chargers, but we'll get into how the schedule after the Saint game ends up having a whole lot of landmines. Now, your question about who's calling the shots here, I don't think it's a Daboll exclusive decision. No way, no how. Ownership is going to be tapped in on this. The general manager, Joe Schoen, is going to be tapped in on this. I don't think Brian Daboll by himself is saying, this is when I'm going to Jaxson Dart. That's my read on it.
Well, that's interesting because Brian Daboll's job status, this is my favorite thing in the NFL, JJ, when coaches and GMs are in position where it's not necessarily about team or it's about rule number one, keep your job. and then figure the rest out. That's rule number one for coaches and GMs. And I look at this with Brian Daboll, with Joe Schoen. That's got to be front of mind for them. And then ownership. I mean, if Russell Wilson turns in 2-3 more games like he did last week, we know the fan base. I mean, he is a very frustrating player to watch at this point in his career. So I'm very interested in who's pulling the strings. And then I look at Daboll, and I think he's an interesting character in the NFL. Jana, and I want your read on this before I give you my what evidence do we have that Brian Daboll knows what he's doing as an NFL head coach? Are you bullish on him, or are you more, you kind of make a good point that maybe the track record isn't sterling?
So it's interesting, Sheil. In his first year, I thought he was an outstanding head coach because I looked at the roster and I said, it's brutal. Daniel Jones was not exactly lighting the world on fire. He went to the playoffs. He won a playoff game on the road. And I'm like, okay, the Giants have their head coach. There's nothing to discuss here. The last 2 years have been atrocious. Absolutely atrocious. I don't care if the Giants didn't end up with the number one pick. You watch NFL Football Weekly. I watch NFL Football Weekly. They were the worst team in the league last year. They were unwatchable. They were embarrassingly bad. I mean, that's the best way to put it. I don't know if that's grammatically correct, but I'm making it grammatically correct. They were a disgrace. I have serious questions on whether or not Brian Daboll is a big-time head coach. And I think his selling point to what you just illustrated is 1,000% spot on. In order for Brian Daboll to go and save his job, Jaxson Dart needs to take over at some point. I don't know if it's week 5. I don't know if it's week 8. But Jaxson Dart has to come in and sell John Mara, maybe to a lesser extent, sell Joe Schoen, and most importantly, sell Giant fans on the idea, hey, we're not going to be any good, but we got a guy. And that's where this timetable to me is interesting, because I think the obvious answer is, hey, get Dart in there, sell hope, sell progress. After that Saint game, Sheil, they got 2 games with the Eagles. You know the Giant history with the Eagles. Yeah. They got a game at Denver against the Broncos. Top 5 defense in the league. Very, very tough place to play. And I know it doesn't get easier in November with the Packers, the Bears, the Niners, on and on we go. But I almost think you're better off trying to hold off until early November, because if you go to Dart and he stinks and you have one of the worst records in the league, you may be ownership saying, well, there's no progress here. We have a top pick in the draft. I don't like my coach. I don't like my GM. We'll just take another quarterback. We'll do the Josh Rosen, Kyler Murray type deal, you know? So I want to make sure if I'm putting Jaxson Dart on the field, he's not going to look like a guy who does not belong.
I mean, I just have a hard time if I'm Daboll looking at this going, I'm going to stick with Russell Wilson till November. I don't care who they're playing. You know, like, can you find ways to put him in position to succeed? And what I find very interesting about this, I do think Daboll knows how to kind of work the media a little bit, or, hey, you know, what do I want them to see? There's all this reporting that he's going on a field, we're on a side field working with Jaxson Dart. Your colleague at SNY, Conor Hughes, tweeted, I was in the Giants locker room talking to Jaxson Dart after the preseason game with the Jets. When Brian Daboll walked over, he shook Dart's hand, looked him straight in the eyes, and just said, I love you. No emotion, no hug, said it, then walked away. There's all this reporting, and I think Daboll's a savvy guy where he knows who's watching, he knows who's around, and there's all this reporting that Jaxson Dart is his guy. And to your point, he's going to get to a point very soon. I think it might be this. I think halftime out of week 2.
Sheil, it's not out of the question that they're down 20-3 to the Cowboys.
Right.
And he basically throws his hands up in the air and says, to hell with it. Let's go to Dart. Let's make them move around, shake it up, the whole deal. Here's the problem. I'm not suggesting that I'm a Russell Wilson believer. I'm not. That game against Washington, Russell Wilson had no chance. They had no running game. You take Andrew Thomas off the offensive line, and Sheil, I know offensive lines should not be this way. The Giant offensive line without Andrew Thomas for the last 4 years, you take them out of the equation, they're the worst offensive line in football. They cannot run simple offensive plays without Andrew Thomas. That can't be. That's a major problem, an indictment of Brian Daboll and his offensive system and his coaching staff and whatnot. You got to be able to figure it out. But I would be a little hesitant if Andrew Thomas is not going to be back maybe for another couple of weeks. I almost in a way would want to coincide his return with Jaxson Dart's arrival, where it's like, okay, our offensive line is going to be the best it can possibly be. Hey, young buck, you're set up. Let's go.
Yeah, that wouldn't be a bad move. We see it with tackles around the NFL. You lose that stud left tackle or right tackle, and the whole offense changes. But this is where I come back to Daboll, and it's like, this is what the money's for, JJ. I mean, I was looking up some numbers on him that are pretty alarming. Now, I know he had the good first year. There have been 204 head coaches in NFL history who have coached at least 50 games. Brian Daboll ranks 184th. Out of 204, an NFL hit. You should see the names next to him. 356 win percentage. You look at the last 3 years, teams that have won fewer games than the Giants. Patriots, Panthers. That's it. That's the whole thing. And then I look at week 1, and you got him jawing back and forth with Malik Neighbors in the first quarter of a week 1 game. You've got Dan Duggan from The Athletic reporting that Brian Burns comes out to sub Abdul Carter out of the game, and Carter doesn't want to come out, and he's kind of giving him a little shove there. I mean, is it possible that Brian Daboll, and this happens in the NFL, makes his name coaching Josh Allen, which, by the way, nice gig to coach Josh Allen, and maybe he's just not the guy that a lot of people thought he was his first season?
Well, the last 2 years would illustrate exactly that. And I think another interesting subplot here that came out of nowhere that I most certainly did not expect last Sunday is Daniel Jones lighting up the Miami Dolphins the way that he did. And I get it, Sheil. Indianapolis, better offensive line, underrated skill position players, Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman. I love Ty Warren out of your school, Penn State. He's going to be the real deal at tight end. So there's plenty to work with. But I'm watching Daniel Jones look like Peyton Manning, and I'm not suggesting he's going to do that against Denver and some of the other tougher games that are on his schedule. But if he ends up having a year where Indianapolis is solid, and all of a sudden they're back in the playoffs, and he's leading a playoff team, and it's like the Giants are lost at sea, doesn't necessarily help Brian Daboll's case, to your point.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Daboll's got a lot of things working against him. He's very fortunate he still has a job. The reason he has a job, let's be real about this. John Mara doesn't want to keep firing coaches and general managers. He doesn't want to do it because he did it with Gettleman. You know, he did it with all Shermer, McAdoo. Since Tom Coughlin has walked out that door, the Giants have been an absolute you-know-what show for a decade. That's the reality of the situation. So I think he's kind of hesitant where it's like, I don't want to be doing this again. But if you have the wrong people in charge, you got to have that come to Jesus moment where it's not meant to be. Brian Daboll wants to keep his job. He better hope Jaxson Dart not just plays, but Jaxson Dart looks the part.
Yeah, it's like even if Daniel Jones just looks competent, that's kind of an indictment. He doesn't have to look great. If he looks like the 20th best quarterback or something, you didn't see that in New York the last 2 seasons. That's the type of thing that catches ownership's attention. And I totally agree with you. The Giants want this. They want to be seen as, hey, we're a stable franchise. Traditionally, we're not the Jets, which I want to get to here in a second. And I think that's the reason sometimes maybe they hang on too long. So let's take a break. I want to come back and I actually want to talk about how the Giants are treated versus how the Jets are treated. And you are the perfect person to ask about that. All right, we're back on the Ringer NFL show. I've been on this crusade, JJ. A lot of listeners of the Ringer NFL show, if you've been listening for years, you know I've said this before, but I've never gotten to ask someone like you who works in the market. I think it's time we start treating the Giants like the Jets. Jets get made fun of nonstop. They're a punching bag, and a lot of it's deserved. But the Giants always get the benefit of the doubt. Oh, classy franchise. They know what they're doing. And every little thing gets hyped up with the Giants, I feel like. Danny Dime, remember the Tommy Cutlets thing? Brian Daboll after 1 year is Vince Lombardi. Even Darren Waller last year, it was like, oh my gosh, he's going to take the league by storm. Well, even Jaxson Dart this summer. But if you look at it, you said it. The last 10 years, teams that have fewer wins than the Giants and are the Jaguars and the Jets. That's it. In the entire NFL, 10 years, the Jaguars and the Jets. They make the decision to pay Daniel Jones. They film the Hard Knocks and have the Saquon Barkley embarrassment. They go 9-25 the last 2 years with Daboll and Schoen. And then this offseason, JJ, all I read about, the vibes are good in New York. And I'm looking at it going, they're returning 10 of 11 starters on an offense that sucked last year, and their quarterback plan is Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, and a second-round pick. And you mentioned the coaching stuff. Since Coughlin's gone, last 3 coaches, Daboll, Joe Judge, Pat Shermer. I mean, these guys have each won fewer than 40% of their games. So they are like the same. I know it's different in the coverage and some of the stuff behind the scenes, but in terms of results for a decade, there's not a lot of difference between the Giants and the Jets. And I don't understand why the Giants seem to always get the benefit of the doubt and reasons for optimism and stuff getting hyped up. And then the Jets are just a punching bag. So what am I wrong about? What do you think about that?
Okay, there's a lot to unpack here. So I want to give everybody context. I've grown up in New York City my whole life. I am not a New York football fan. I root for the Miami Dolphins, in case you didn't know. But I can come at this from a fair, balanced, objective type of perspective with no rooting interest. I believe the Giants, because of the pedigree of the franchise and the 2 Super Bowls they won under Eli Manning and Tom Coughlin, were given this sort of goodwill that extended way too long. Way too long. And I would say the point I really turned and started to side with you, because I would say my early years in the market, I would remind everybody, hey, this is still a franchise that's a couple of years removed from a Super Bowl. We all understand how hard that is to do. Eli Manning's record, Tom Coughlin's record, like, you deserve that benefit of the doubt. That all went out the window to me when they dismissed Tom Coughlin and when they butchered, if you remember, the Eli Manning benching. And I'll never forget how ballistic I went. And I love Saquon Barkley. I think he's a gentleman. I think he's a class act. He was a very likable guy and easy guy to root for. That pick at number 2 by Dave Gettleman was inexcusable and made absolutely no sense for a team that was nowhere. They were in the abyss as a franchise, and they're drafting a running back with the 2nd overall pick. They never recovered from Gettleman. They never recovered from that decision. And I would say, for me personally, Sheil, the last 8 years, I have roasted the Giants in the same way that I have roasted the Jets. I think the difference among some of my New York media brethren is the ownership, because they still look at the ownership, despite the pitfalls that John Mara has made. Don't get me wrong. He has had a terrible run over the last few years, and he's associated with everything there is to be associated with the Giants. He still presided over those championships. Whereas you look at Woody Johnson, and, you know, his kids in the locker room, it's Rodgers, he's involved in everything. He doesn't get that same sort of benefit of the doubt. That said, the results, and if we're just talking about results, they've been equally pathetic for both franchises over an 8-9 year period. Maybe a little bit more success for the Giants by smidge, because they actually have gone to the playoffs. I know, low bar around here. It really gets dark and gloomy when you talk about these New York football teams and what I've been doing throughout my career. Just throwing that out there. We don't have the Philly, New England, Kansas City run here. We're used to a whole lot of coaching changes and draft picks and all that sort of mumbo jumbo. But I do think your overall point about some media members giving the Giants a pass because of their prior pedigree is 1,000% accurate.
Yeah, and I don't even think it's just locally. I think nationally as well, the same thing. And you offer a good explanation. If you're a fan and with that ownership, you've won multiple Super Bowls, you remember those times. You remember how you felt those years, how excited you were when they beat the Patriots. That does count for something. It's a question of, when does that grace period kind of end?
Hey, we're seeing it with the Patriots now. Aren't we? Like, it's
right.
Interesting. The Giants obviously didn't have the amount of success that the Patriots had with Brady and Belichick, but I kind of think you're getting that same element, not to change the subject, but it's true where ownership delivered for you. Now they're not delivering, and it's like, well, do we want to blame them or not?
Right. Yeah. No, there's no doubt about it. And I think I think every fan base, if you said Jets ownership or Giants ownership, they would take Giants ownership. I just look at it and, you know, Jets fans, I got Jets. They're so sick. They're always the punching bag. And a lot of times they should be the punching bag because of ownership and because of the lack of success they've had. But then I look at Giants and it's always a different story. And it's always like, well, if they do that, I mean, I can't believe that they stuck with these guys. And to your point, I think part of it is they want that mirage of, no, we know what we're doing. We're stable. We're going to be patient. They don't want to be looked at as the impulsive ownership group that we're pulling the plug too early. But if you're a fan, I mean, you tell me, you talk to how many Giants fans actually wanted Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll? What was the split in your estimation? Wanted them back for this year to give them another chance?
You know, it's interesting. I think there are a lot of Giant fans in my life who gave both a pass because of how sour and rotten the Gettleman regime was. And, I think the proponents of Joe Schoen are like, okay, they're trying to modernize the New York Giants. They're trying to do stuff that, quite frankly, was not going on with Schoen or with Gettleman for a couple of years. So like scouting, analytics, a lot of that stuff that's really now coming to the forefront. You had some Giant fans saying, hey, let them see it through. Let them draft their quarterback because they inherited Daniel Jones. So I think that definitely played a part of it. But there were other Giant fans in my life who were like, I don't care. These guys are not any good. They actually wanted to give Daniel Jones money. That was Sheil, them winning a playoff game and them actually making the playoffs.
Yeah.
There's no question. Because in my heart of hearts, Schoen and Daboll probably thought they were walking in that first year. They're going to go 6-11, 5-12. Jones will not be the answer. Great. We can say goodbye to Jones.
Yeah.
Maybe we trade Saquon Barkley. We blow it up. We do it our way. Then they go and make the playoffs and win a playoff game. And it's like, what we got to keep the quarterback, right? Like we can't not keep the quarterback, but it killed them. Absolutely killed them.
It's a great example of how people in NFL buildings, they a lot of times don't know what their team's going to do. I remember the Eagles in 2017, people in the building were like, hey, if we could take a little step forward, maybe win 8 or 9 games, that'd be a great outcome. And then they go on to win the Super Bowl. It's hard. It's not just me and you getting predictions wrong, JJ. It's people in the building. All right, let's finish this with a prediction. Jaxson Dart is inserted as the Giants starting quarterback when, says JJ.
Okay. I'm going to have to edit my early November prediction because I think the timetable has been shifted. And clearly, I'm not in love with what I saw week 1 against the Commanders. I don't care what the final score was. They should have lost that game by 25 points.
Yes.
I am going to say after the Charger game at home, it's possible it's the second half of the Charger game, but I'm going to say more likely week 5, soft landing spot at the New Orleans Saints.
Week 5 at the Saints. Jaxson Dart. I'm saying this Sunday.
Second half.
If you're watching, if you're on the Red Zone or whatever, if you've got the quad box up for YouTube TV, make sure one of those games is on Giants Cowboys because I think they're going to get a surprise in the second half because I was looking at the math here. So last 25 years, 24 quarterbacks have been taken in the second round and about 7 of them have turned into competent starters, about 30%. So if you look at that in your Brian Daboll, you say 30% versus what are the chances I'm going to be having a competitive season with Russell Wilson? I think it's lower than 30%. And your job's on the line. You like the kid. It seems like you like the kid. You can scheme something up with him. He's going to do what you tell him because he's a rookie. He's not going to improvise like Russell Wilson. They've already moved Jaxson Dart up to the second spot, behind Russell Wilson, ahead of Jameis Winston. So Cowboys have a pretty vanilla defense. They're not the most talented group. I think Daboll spends this week. He's just going on the side, prepping Jaxson Dart a little bit. He's going to see how Sunday goes. And if they have a first half like they had last week against the Commanders, I think Jaxson Dart's on the field after halftime. So
what you're telling me is I should bet the Cowboys in the first half of this game.
Yeah.
That's what you're telling me.
It might not be a bad one. All right. This was a lot of fun. John Jastremski, New York, the Ringer gambling show. Consume everything he does on the Ringer. And like I said, his 400 other gigs. He's got the gift of gab. You will always be entertained. JJ, thanks for coming on. I'll be right back with the Hurry Up. And now it's time for a special part of today's episode, the Hurry Up, brought to you by NFL Sunday Ticket on YouTube. If you're an NFL fan like me, there's one move to make before the season kicks off, and that's subscribing to NFL Sunday Ticket on YouTube TV. You get every game, every Sunday, all in one place, and you can watch up to 4 games at once with multi-view, so you never miss a key moment on the field. It is an incredible feature, but with so many games to choose from, narrowing it down to 4 is a job for an expert, and that expert is me. With NFL Sunday Ticket for out-of-market games and YouTube TV base plan for local and national games, requires base plan, excludes digital-only games and commercial use, terms, embargoes, and restrictions apply. No refunds. And I'll tell you what, one game I'm going to have in the quad box on Sunday in week 2 is Titans Rams. Now that's going to surprise some of you. You're going to be like, what are you talking about? Titans Rams. I do want to see Cam Ward, first of all, but I also want to keep an eye on Titans head coach Brian Callahan, because I got to tell you, there seem to be a lot of red flags with this guy, signs that he just might not be up for the job of being an NFL head coach. So this kind of flew under the radar a little bit. But last week, tight game against the Broncos, rookie wide receiver Elick Iamanor came down with a 23-yard catch that the officials ruled incomplete. He got his elbow down, which means it was a catch and could have been challenged. After the game, Brian Callahan tells reporters an elbow doesn't equal 2 feet. So his foot would have had to come down as well. Wrong, Brian Callahan. Nope, the elbow would have been enough. So they follow up with more questions about it later in the week. And Callahan says, I misspoke. I'm well aware of the rule. I understand how it works. And the way that I articulated it afterwards was incorrect. And I understand the rules of this game pretty well. That's per ESPN. Okay, so let me get this straight. First year with Will Levis, a complete disaster. Special teams, historically bad. He is 3-15 in 18 games as a head coach. And in week 1 of a close game with the number 1 overall pick at quarterback, a game that his team could have stolen, they were in it the whole way, a game in which the offense had 7 total first downs, the head coach cost your team a 23-yard completion because he did not know the rules. Now, I'm not trying to overreact here. There's a lot going on for an NFL head coach, but you have people in your headset. There are people on your staff that are supposed to help you out, and it didn't happen there. And it's not just one thing. I'm trying to find a single way where Brian Callahan is supposedly giving his team an edge, because that's what coaching comes down to. Where are you giving your team an edge? And we have seen no evidence of that through his first 18 games as the Titans head coach. So maybe he'll be a quarterback whisperer with Cam Ward. Let's see. But if this were a bigger market, I feel like Brian Callahan would be getting roasted. So I'm going to keep an eye on him this weekend, see how he's doing with the game management, see how that experiment is going in Tennessee, because so far it has been ugly. And if you listen to the show, I like, ripping coaches a little bit when they make mistakes like that. All right. With every game, every Sunday at your fingertips, choosing the ones that deserve a spot on your multi-view screen is serious business. Seriously fun business. Never miss a moment of the action with NFL Sunday Ticket on YouTube TV. And right now, you can get NFL Sunday Ticket month to month and cancel anytime. Go to youtube.com/NFL to sign up now. Local and national games on YouTube TV. NFL Sunday Ticket for out-of-market games. Excludes digital-only games. Base plan required. Renews every month during the 2025 regular season only. Your membership for the following month can be canceled anytime before your renewal date. Terms, restrictions, and embargoes apply. Commercial use excluded. All right. Appreciate everyone listening. Thank you to John Jastremski. Thank you to Christopher Sutton for producing. Kiera Givens and Brian Waters on social. Additional production supervision by Conor Nevins and Arjuna Ramgopowell. We'll be back tomorrow on the Ringer NFL Show.
Must be 21 plus and present in select states. For Kansas, in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, or 18 plus and present in D.C., Kentucky, or Wyoming. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit rg-help.com. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut or visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York.